Welcome to another episode of the I Know a Guy podcast. On this episode, I welcome Forrest Hope. Forrest is a Vietnam veteran, a Marine, and a personal friend of mine. On this episode, he's going to talk about what life was like in America during the Vietnam War. He's going to talk about what life was like in Vietnam while he was serving our country and how he put patriotism above politics. He's also going to talk about the unjust discrimination that he and tens of thousands of military personnel faced when they came back to the mainland in the United States. I hope you enjoy this podcast, and thank you for listening to the I Know a Guy podcast. So, Forrest, you're with us today. Thank God, right?
Thank God.
You're a veteran of the Vietnam War,
Yes.
and what I'd like to do is sort of paint a picture of what life was like prior to you going to the war, and then maybe your experiences going into war, and then maybe after war. So, what year did you go into the war, and what was life like just before that moment?
Well, I graduated high school on time in 1965. Fourth generation Alachua County Floridian. And so I grew up here in Gainesville, Florida. And it was very patriotic. John Wayne was the star of all times.
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam was just a place. There was, we didn't really at that age, at 18, you didn't watch the news.
Mm-hmm.
You're more interested in other things. So whenever I got out of school, I went to junior college down in Ocala, about 45-minute drive. And after the first semester, I decided I was tired of doing what I was doing and wanted some freedom. And so I was ready to leave home, and I thought, well, heck, I'll just go ahead and join the service, and if I'm going to join the service, I'm going to go ahead and join the Marines. So I enlisted in the Marines and went to boot camp first week in January of 1966.
And at that time, we were already in war, right?
But we had been in Vietnam since the 50s as advisors, and it was starting to escalate a little bit at the time. Back in the history of Vietnam, they've been fighting for centuries. And what led to all of this was that during World War II, the French were occupying Vietnam, and the agreement was that at the treaty that ended World War II is that the French would pull out. Well, they didn't, and so the Vietnamese and the French did not get along, and they wanted to be their own
country
government.
Okay.
Okay, and not being told as a provincial government what to do. And so it's North Vietnam invaded South Vietnam in order to make the unification of the two countries. Now, I find out all this decades after the war is over, but just researching, trying to find out why we were there. At the time, we were there because that's what the government said to do, and patriotism was very high at the time. Just like I say, the heroes from World War II, heroes from the Korean War, John Wayne, and all that kind of stuff. It was, that was the time. The French got run out of Vietnam, and our government at the time thought it was a good idea to send advisors in to help the South Vietnamese overcome the North Vietnamese, which was very much communist at the time. Kind of bring it back to where I was is that went into boot camp. I reported to Jacksonville, Florida, and went into the courthouse and sick as a dog. I just nervousness and whatnot, and I can imagine all the attorneys that were there. One of my head, this little kid comes in and starts throwing up in the bathroom, but that's just the way that it was. And went to Paris Island, and it's pretty cold during the wintertime and along the coast. but I got out of there before most of the no-see-ums and the mosquitoes
Yeah.
got there. The Marines taught me, they trained to do what we needed to do and different skills. And as long as you were doing what you were told to do, you were doing it, you would do well.
Now, where's Paris Island?
Paris Island is in South Carolina, just outside of Charleston,
Okay.
Beaufort, Charleston area.
Okay.
And I had been back there on 3 different occasions. Now, my son graduated from there also. And it's just a pretty place.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, whenever I got there, it was in the middle of the night, and you're on a bus, and somebody wakes you up hollering and screaming at the bus, get out, and get on these yellow footprints, and that's where you're supposed to stand until he says move.
Mm.
And they took you marched you to a room, and they said, "I don't go to sleep, I'll be right back." And about every 20 minutes, he would come back to make sure you weren't asleep. And he says, "Don't go to sleep, I got something for you to do," and sit there. About every 20 minutes, he'd come back. Well, 6 hours later, it was time to eat breakfast, and then he came and marched us to breakfast. And they were just trying to deprive us of sleep. The best thing to do, and all military services do this, is they tear you down so they can build you up the way that they want you to be built. And Marines are very good at it. And so that next day we got haircuts and mailed all our clothes home, all our books, all our possessions, toothbrushes, everything we mailed home because they wanted you to have their toothbrush, their this, their that, their skivvies, their boots, their socks. And so we went to class after class after class and drilled and to where you knew there was no right way and wrong way. There was just the Marine way.
Mm.
And if you did it wrong, you just hadn't got a hold of it yet. You keep on practicing until you get the Marine way. And so as we come out of,
Can I ask you about class? Is that a physical class or a mental class or both? Are you studying books, papers, or
yeah, we study books. We study history of the Marine Corps to build up that esprit de corps. We taken how to take at the time we were using M14 rifles. You're supposed to be able to take that rifle apart and put it back together in the dark. I mean, they say blindfolded. Well, people cheat with blindfolds, so they just turn the lights out.
Wow.
And do it. I had the same thing with a lot of classes on the 911 45 caliber pistol, where you could take that apart and test fire it. And we'd go out to the range and we'd throw grenades, and we would experiment with different weapons, and just so you would be familiarized. There was a lot of physical exercise, PT, and climbing ropes, going through obstacle courses, just trying to get you built up the way they want you to be built up. Okay? At the end of boot camp, you're assigned what your military occupation specialist, MOS, will be. That's a particular number. And mine happened to be a 2533, which is a radio operator. And so then he sent me home for a while, and then back out to San Diego, California. There I was in school for about 6 months, learning teletype, Morse code, and got fairly proficient at it. But I mean, I don't know why, but we never used it. But that was just something that they wanted you to know. And when that was done, then I had orders to report to Camp Pendleton, California, and then to Vietnam.
So back into when you were given your MOS, is it just random? They kind of pick, we think you suit this, you don't get to choose, no, I want to be this role, I want to do this job.
The recruiter tells you a different story. He said, "What would you like to do? What would you like to do?
Okay.
Where would you like to go?" And oh yeah, we can take care of that. Well, that was all didn't happen that way. It's kind of random where they pick out that you would be suited to do this, you would be suited to do this, and if it's most of them, obviously at the time were infantrymen,
Mm-hmm.
riflemen, and the Marines they might be trained as a cook or radio operator or a truck driver, but they're number one, they're a rifleman, and that's what we spend a lot of our time with in boot camp and in infantry training and whatnot is working with rifles.
What year is it right now that you've gone to California and you're getting ready to get your orders to go to Vietnam?
Okay, now in spring and fall of '66.
And so the United States has been in Vietnam for a little while now.
They've been in a little while and they're starting to build up.
What's the attitude at home? What's in the news? What are people feeling at home? And
Whenever I got home, I didn't watch the news. I was
Okay.
more interested in seeing my buddies from high school and dating.
Yep.
I mean, that's
So how old are you right now? This time,
18.
18 years of age.
And I was report to Pendleton and then Okinawa for a while, a week, and then on to Vietnam. Flew in to Da Nang Marine Air Base, and then by a small C-130 flew to Dong Ha, which is northern part of Vietnam, South Vietnam, and that's where I was assigned to the 12th Marines headquarters, which was an artillery unit.
What are the conditions on the plane? What are the conditions you're flying over? Are you sitting in nice, comfortable seats? Are you kind of just on some kind of cargo type plane sitting?
No, it was a commercial flight over
Okay, so the commercial flight over.
into Da Nang, but once we got there, then we were in military aircraft. And C-130s, you enter in from the back, and the seats are on the side,
Okay.
and you just sit there and wait. And everybody was taking it nervous, but there were some people who were flying from Da Nang up to Dong Ha who were just they'd been in country already for 6 months. They just maybe coming back from a R&R,
Mm-hmm.
rest and relaxation period, or maybe there were officers being transferred or whatever. So there were, 30 people on the plane, and I was just a new guy.
Mm.
And I was in new utilities. They were not muddy. They were not clay covered, and new leather boots, which was issued from boot camp. That's what everybody was issued. And
Are you over there with buddies at all, or is this just you're just on a foreign piece of soil? I mean, you're surrounded by other military personnel that are from the United States, I'm assuming, but you're alone, right?
absolutely. There again, to go back to the recruiter, is that I had a good friend who he and I went in on a buddy system, and that was the last time we saw each other until a high school class reunion 20 years later. Our buddy system was, see you, buddy.
Yeah.
So when we got over there, I met one person that I had been in high school with. He was in the Army. He was a pilot. And just by happenstance, he happened to come into the headquarters where I was working. But that's the only contact back, other than letters and stuff from home. But I was over there by myself, and just a new guy, and just follow instructions, do what you're told, and you'll get by. Because everybody was a newbie at one time.
Sure. So 18 years of age, you're in Vietnam. And where are you located right now? Where are you?
In Dong Ha.
Dong Ha. And are you at where you're going to be working, or are you relocated somewhere else at some point?
Well, Dong Ha is a big base.
Okay.
Okay, it's got Army, it's got Seabees, it's got Marines, and so I'm with the Marines, and so I'm attached to headquarters. Okay, so the headquarters is a compound which is probably maybe a 10-acre parcel of land, and there are tents around the area. Headquarters is in the middle, and being an artillery headquarters, they have artillery units that are underneath them. So there's no artillery units there, but they are some 3 miles away that way, 4 miles away that way, 7 miles that way. They have an area of responsibility that they look after. And so they moved their batteries, artillery batteries, to different locations for different firepower points. Um, and I worked as a radio operator out of headquarters. And any time that any one of the individual batteries would need a radio operator, they would draw one from headquarters. Now, it might be, is it because one of the radio operators died, and so he has to be replaced?
Mm.
Until a replacement can get in, someone from headquarters is sent there. That might be one day, it might be 2 weeks. And then the replacement comes in, and the one that belongs back to headquarters goes back to headquarters, waiting on that next assignment and standing radio watch during the time.
So, where the actual fighting is taking place, and the parts you may see on, National Geographic or History Channel type stuff, where they're showing, where is it relatively quiet and calm at headquarters?
At headquarters, it's fairly quiet and calm until we received artillery, rockets, and mortar fire. You could identify the pop
Mm-hmm.
sound whenever one of those was fired in your direction, and you knew that after about 3 of these events, somebody hollering incoming, you knew that that's the sound
Mm-hmm.
of one coming in. And whether it be a rocket, which there were a lot of rockets that were fired in. Now, these rockets are 5-6 feet long. They're made of aluminum, and they're probably about 8-10 inches in diameter, and they carry explosives. So whenever they hit, they explode.
Mm-hmm.
And they would try to pinpoint positions in this big base to where they would be most effective. There were, for whatever reason, would allow Vietnamese to come in to the big base to do laundry, to take and clean up hooches, clean up tents, take and run errands, whatever that they were doing. But some of those were also pacing off where, your rocket attack last night, the rocket that you did fire, you're 45 yards short. And they would step it off so they would know, okay, tonight we're going to do a different one. We're going to be a little bit longer. And
so Vietnamese, the U.S. military, I'm guessing, needed them or used them to do laundry, clean, and do maintenance type stuff, I guess?
Well, the Vietnamese were in very poor conditions.
Mm-hmm.
It was one night I had guard duty down at the junkyard, the garbage dump, and you're awakened at 4 o'clock in the morning, well before daylight, by the Vietnamese rummaging through trying to find anything they can use.
Mm.
So that's how poor the country was. Now, did we need them to come in and do laundry, say? No, heck no. I was in different places that I did my own laundry. But you're helping somebody else. And that's what we were supposed to be there for, is to help this other country.
But at the same time, it's hard to identify who is counting paces and setting you up. And
Exactly.
Wow. The headquarters, the base. Are we set in a jungle? Are we on a desert? Are we in tents? Are we in buildings?
We're in tents. And building bunkers. Every waking hour that you weren't on duty, you were pretty much expected to be filling sandbags to build bunkers. Mm. And I don't know. I think our headquarters, where the radios were kept, we probably, during my time there, probably had 4 different bunkers. Because whenever you built one, that's good. Now let's do a better one over here. And, whether that's the Marine way or not, but I mean, you're in a hurry to get one done because of the rockets that come in. But now we can do a better one. So do we add on to this one, or do we take and just do one next to it and make it better? And so the last time the last bunker that I remember, I mean, it had wood floors, it had sandbag and concrete walls, it had steel roof, and the bladder that you would put fuel in, a big rubber bladder, which is about 3/4 of an inch thick rubber was laid across the top of it to prevent rain from coming in. And I mean, it was air conditioned. It was nice, and it had maps on the wall, and it was probably about a 40 by 40 bunker, 40 feet by 40 feet.
What were the sleeping conditions like? Were you in a tent as well on cots or?
Well, whenever I got there, we were in a tent that we would have on cots that had, I'm thinking there were 12 people to the tent. And as we progressed and got things bigger and better and bunkers and sandbags and all that, we went to a wood floor. You get up off the ground, still in cots. And the tents we were able to take and roll up the sides and had netting that came down to keep the mosquitoes out.
And so it was hot?
Oh, it's hot. There's no air conditioning. There's no heater.
Zero.
The heat, I mean, just the heat you can put up with is the cold that you have a hard time with, because it's whenever it rains over there during the monsoon season, that's when it gets cold. But I learned to take my poncho and wrap myself in the poncho, and that keeps the body heat in. And you learn to improvise and do different things.
Were you able to reach family at all and tell them how you're doing or anything like that?
There was letters, obviously, and there was a system to where you could write up where the postage goes, write free, and the post people would see where it came from, which is in Vietnam, Fleet Marine Force. So I could write home for free, no stamps. Did not need any. There was called a Mars military air radio system or something like that, to where we'd be able to take and make an appointment, coordinate it with family, to get on the Mars system. And it would be a radio that you would be able to talk to your family or somebody that you wanted to. I was able to do this on 3 different occasions while I was there. So it's not like you go put a quarter in a telephone booth or whatever. If people remember what a phone booth is.
Yeah.
But it was being a radio is that you would talk and you would say over. And then my mother or my father would talk back, and they would have to say over before whoever was doing the radio would switch it over so I could talk.
They're basically pulling wires and stuff like a old operator system, I guess, or
something. I mean,
I'm guessing. I don't know.
I would be too. So,
well,
but you had to say over, so
sure.
they knew you.
So go ahead and switch something. Well, I mean, they taught. So when I was born in the early '80s, that was, I guess, regular telephones. But then I was educated on what a party line was, whereas all the neighbors could hear each other talking, or they were nosy because you're all on the same line or something. But I'd imagine something probably similar, but it's across, it's halfway across the world. So do you ever move from the base you're at? Is that the headquarters? Is that where you stay the entire time, or do you ever?
Well, I was assigned out to several different bases during the time I was there. I went to from there at Dong Ha. I was sent to Con Tien, which had been ambushed, and I had to take and jump out of a helicopter and give them a radio and wait for the helicopter to come back and pick me up. It was not but about an hour. They were trying to do it between mortar attacks, and to jump back on the helicopter, and they flew me to Quang Tri.
Can you take me through that real quick?
Okay.
Just you get orders that because you do radio, right?
I do radio.
So you need to get a radio to somebody on the ground, and they're going to fly you into an area that's under attack, if you will, active. And how high up above is the helicopter off the ground, and what is it, a jungle below you? Is it an open field?
No. This is up in the northern I-Corps area, which is where I was. Is there very, very little jungle, very little.
Okay.
It was very mountainous and hilly. Okay, we would still call it hilly, but there were very few trees, a lot of rocks, and being in communications radio is lieutenant in charge or captain would come in and say, okay, I need somebody to go to Contiana and carry this radio. They had to have the radio there because that's the only way they can call back to headquarters to say, I have a fire mission for you, or I need help here.
Fire mission meaning send.
That's send in artillery.
And can you describe a radio for me? We're not talking just a handheld, like just a little walkie-talkie.
No, it's
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Let me stop you right there.
But why?
I got to tell you about Bakari Realty.
What's a Bakari Realty?
We're a full-service real estate firm in North Central Florida, working with buyers and sellers to buy and sell property.
North Central Florida. Is there a desert there?
No, there's no desert in North Central Florida, but there are a lot of people moving here from the desert and all over the country.
You think you can help me to move to Florida?
I've never sold anything to a cactus, but we can certainly try.
Okay, so I need to know how to get a hold of you.
Well, you can look at my phone number up. It's online. It's also on the bottom of the screen here, and I'll also give it to you, 386-462-5130.
Well, I'll do that. I just hope I don't stick you.
It's a PRC. I forget the nomenclature of it. Okay, it's one that you would wear on your back. Okay, and they're about 3.5, 4 inches wide by 12 by 18. Got an antenna coming out of the back.
Okay.
It's the one you see in pictures of them walking around with the antenna coming out and handset and talking to.
How heavy is that thing?
Probably about 25 pounds.
Mm. So they're flying, and also being in a mountain area, open area, you're a possible target too.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so how high off the ground are you when you drop? Are you,
when they tell me to jump,
yeah.
I'm about 5 or 6 feet off the ground.
Okay.
And they tell me hold on to that radio and hit and roll. And so I did, and got up, brushed myself off, handed the radio to the lieutenant, and they say, okay, I'm ready. And he said, well, you just stay down. We'll get that helicopter back in here shortly.
Wow.
So they came back in and a little while and picked me up. And because at the time, Dong Ha was under a rocket attack, is they did not want to fly me back into Dong Ha, so they flew me to the next air base, which is in Quang Tri. So here I am, 19 years old now probably, and dumped off in another foreign area. Quang Tri is a much bigger place than Dong Ha, but you're 20 miles away. How do you get to where you want to go? You can't just, there's no Greyhound or Trailways. So I said, which way is it? And get out and start thumbing a ride. Immediately, sometime, there will be somebody coming along in a motor convoy headed that way. And I had a captain pick me up, and where you headed? And I said, 12th Marine, sir. And he said, hop on. I'm going there too. So
was there a downtime? Was there a time when you could venture out and outside the base?
Oh, no. You didn't want to do that.
Okay.
You had to stay close proximity to where you were. I was sent out one time to the mouth of the Dong Ha River, which was a sandy beach area with pines in the background, but sand dunes up high towards the ocean to protect the little base that was set up there. Here again, I was on radio duty in probably about 5 weeks maybe. And you go down to where the river meets the ocean, the Indian Ocean, and that's where you would bathe. And that's where you'd wash your clothes. But other than going to getting shower and coming back to your tent and being on radio duty, that's all you did. You didn't want to go over the sand dunes and expose yourself. You didn't want to go on the other side of the river because that was supposedly occupied by the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. And you didn't wander all through the woods just for anything. I was stationed at out west of Dong Ha, sent out to Camp Carroll, which was another artillery base, sent out there to set up an antenna, and stayed there for about a week, set up a radio base station for their artillery unit. So by going to those little places, that was your to get out. They would say, okay, here, take this Jeep and go carry this radio over to this base, 6-7 miles away. And in between the two, you would just try to get there as quick as you could, because that any time you could get shot at.
Did you ever get shot at?
Oh yes.
And any explosions or things happen, or I guess in terms of what we see on the TV or the I don't know, are they called foxholes?
They're called foxholes or fighting holes. Yes.
That so my education or understanding of Vietnam was it wasn't a conventional war.
Not at all.
Much different than maybe the U.S. expected, and others, and they were hiding in tunnels and things like that. Is that something you guys were aware of at the time while you were there, that it wasn't conventional, or you were learning on the job, if you will, or
It was on job training, and there were not any tunnels that I came across, but they were a little further south, outside of Da Nang, and one of the patrols that I went on, we went with an Army unit riding in armored personnel carriers. And it's probably about between tanks and armored personnel carriers, probably about 100 units. And the Marine captain and I were assigned to them. And at one point, we got to an open area and a hedgerow about 150 yards in front of us. And so the Army commander had all the tanks and the armored personnel carriers line up. Personnel carriers had 50 caliber machine guns on front, and he said, "Just spray that area, the hedgerow across the way," and it's because you didn't want to walk out into an open field, not knowing what's over there, hidden in the bushes. So they sprayed it with shells, and whenever we got over there, they found several fighting holes that was probably only about 4 feet deep, 2 feet wide, 2 feet, and where a Viet Cong would get in the hole, put a cover over him, and that's where he would wait to fight. Whenever someone would come up, get ready to approach his area, he would lift up that little door and shoot out, and then close the door back. You didn't know he was there.
Wow.
And just a second.
Sure.
So we found several of those, and just to make sure there weren't tunnels, the Army would take and lift up the lid to the hole and drop a grenade in there. And whenever they opened the door back up, they could see if there was a tunnel going out of it anywhere or not, and we never found any tunnels. But there were tunnels in the further south, and one area was very famous for it. I think it's Cu Chi, and they had schools, they had hospitals, they had whole villages set up inside in tunnels that they had made. I mean, you go to the tunnels up in Tennessee,
right?
And you can imagine. Oh no, a lot bigger. Now,
wow.
There's a little small tunnel getting in, but so are the tunnels in Tennessee. But once you get into, the big Mammoth area, to where this is a hospital where you could treat 300 people. And
do you think they did all this in preparation for this war, or was this something that was done long ago?
Oh, they had been in fighting.
Yeah, you mentioned that
centuries. So this was not something they just started. They had tunnels, I'm sure, whenever the French were there and whenever the Japanese were there, and it just that was the way for them to get away.
Well, and in the war, it was North Vietnam versus South Vietnam, right? And the United States bases, the U.S. bases, were in South Vietnam.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And the South Vietnamese people fought alongside the U.S.
Yes, they did. Mm-hmm.
And at this point, for you and going to different bases, about what's the time period? You're 18. You're over there. How long were you there?
Well, I got there in the first week of December of 1966.
Okay.
You have a 1 year, 12-month commitment.
Okay.
All right. And it got close to, I spent Christmas there, obviously, if you get there the 1st of December. And I stood watch all by myself in radio. I mean, there were officers on. But I volunteered to do it since I was a new guy. And don't have to appoint me. I'll go ahead and do it. Y'all do what you want to on Christmas. And so I was there and worked through the year. And as it got close to my time to rotate out, I got to thinking, I sure do want to be home for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. But there's no guarantees. It's 12 months means in country. So they could send me back to the Philippines. They could send me back to Pendleton. But there's no guarantees you're going to get home. They happen to have a program to where if you would extend your stay in duty in Vietnam for 6 months, we'll fly you home free. 30 days, and we'll fly you back. You come back to the same position that you're in, same rank, work with the same people, doing the same thing you're doing. Your option was, we'll get you home whenever you get home. You're going to have to fly home yourself and pay for it. And when you report back to another duty station, we don't know what you're going to be doing or where it's going to be. And it might be, you might end up in Pendleton training somebody else to go over to Vietnam, and in 6 months, we're going to send you back anyway. So, just weighing all the odds, I said, well, hey, this is not such a bad deal. Just send me home. I'll be home for Christmas and see my family, and, see some girls, and
Right.
have a good time, and then I'll come back and I'll be here with my buds because you developed a relationship with the people that you were working with.
And so you did that?
So I did that, and I got home, and I was very fortunate because I was here until sometime about the 7th or 8th of January, whenever I flew from Tampa to San Francisco to the Philippines or to Okinawa, ready to go back. And there was no delays, just send you. And once I got into Da Nang, this is all commercial flights.
Mm-hmm.
Red Cross was looking for me. So, go, new guy, what can I do? I understand you're looking for me. So I identify myself, show my ID. So we have a word for you that your grandfather died.
Mm.
So I was very fortunate to be able to see him one last time before he died. And he wasn't sick or, anything like that. He just, at 69 years old, he just got up one morning and felt like he was tired and went back to bed, didn't get up. So so I was able to see him and be with him. And so made it back up to my base. And the major in charge knew what I had been, what the Red Cross was looking for. And he had, one question. He says, did your grandparents raise you? Because if they did, I can send you back home. And I can sit there and I can lie. I can say,
sure.
Yeah, send me home. Or I can say, no, that he was always there, but my parents raised me.
All right.
And so he said, okay, that's all, Marine. Thank you.
Mm.
So
we haven't gotten into it yet, but you're 18 years of age, and
I'm 19 now.
19, I'm sorry. But 18 when you first go.
Yeah.
Where are you? There has to be some mental drain to it because life's changed. It's not the river and the lake and the beaches. It's a foreign country, but there's a lot of, I know there's a lot of strength in our military, a lot of strength in the folks that have fought for this country. Where do you go? Where do you reach at some point? I know you probably have highlights and good moments and moments where it's like, okay, where am I going with this? What's next? And just trying to get through the days. Where were you mentally?
No, what you do is you're told. They train you very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you accept where you are and what your job is, you do it. And that's what gets you through. Yeah, you ride home, and people get homesick, and
mm-hmm.
their girlfriends break up with them, and all this kind of. Those things happen. You don't ever write a letter saying, I feel like this is my last day. You don't ever write something like that. Or if something happens to me, no, you don't do that. You think positive, and you look forward to the next day. Look forward to the next time home. You think everything is going to remain the same when you get back. Okay, I have been off in a foreign country. I've seen what I've seen. I've heard and smelled what I've smelled. But home is still home.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be just like it was when I left, and that's the biggest fallacy. And you can't train that. You can't unsee the things that you've seen. You know,
So when you went back over in for 6 months more,
6 months more,
same job, same place,
same job, same place, and they sent me to Quang Tree, and I worked with some Australians to take and help set up a radio station for them, operate radio, and show them how the Americans did it, and help them understand the different ways that we read a map for artillery support. Different what they had learned. During this time, I got to like the Australians, and I found out that I was entitled to go to a R&R, rest and recuperation, and that's for a week. And they fly you to several places that you can pick from. There was Bangkok, there was Hawaii, there was Sydney, Australia. There were several half dozen places that you could go to. And I thought that Sydney, Australia is where I'd like to go. And so I rounded up some civilian clothes and didn't have hardly any, but whenever we got to Sydney, they had some that you could borrow or $10 rent 3 sets or whatever. But when we got on the plane, a commercial flight out of Da Nang, they got the plane still on the tarmac. Stewardesses come down on each side, and it's not coffee or tea; it's spray. They're disinfecting the plane, and this is weird. But as I got to understand, they don't want whatever you got in their country, and germs or whatever. So they're disinfecting the plane, and let you sit there, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I happened to be in Sydney on 4th of July, and they had a big 4th of July celebration at some hotel, and I still have the little pamphlet on it. And Olivia Newton-John was a singer who was a nobody at the time.
Okay.
And but I happened to remember her name, and whenever she became famous, then I said, wow.
So she was at the hotel in Sydney.
Yeah, well, I mean, she was the guest. She was a singer. She was the entertainer, and so this was really was cool. And anyway, and stayed there, and then flew back to my same old job, and until August of that year, and of '68 now, and
So let me ask you a question. Doing radio, did that mean you were simply moving? And I don't mean to say simple as if it was easy, but you were moving radio devices around and getting them to people, or were you ever actually listening to what was going on?
Oh, I'm definitely listening. Yeah, no. If you were on Radio Watch, is that you had to keep a log of what went on, and whenever we were attacked, or whenever Quezon was starting to be attacked, is that I was on duty, and my log for that night was probably 3 pages long, from each different company calling in requesting artillery, and to give the in the logbook you could not put the coordinates in, but you had to reference it to a coordinates piece of paper that you had given to the firing officer, so he could verify that it was a safe place to shoot.
Mm.
Okay? And but our logs, we had to monitor. I think they were probably, each battery had their own radio, which would call into headquarters to get approval for firing.
Can you define battery for me a little more? Like, what is a battery?
A battery is 3 or 4 artillery units.
Okay.
Pieces.
Yep.
Okay. And so each one would have their radio, to where they would take and get the information from headquarters, or headquarters would send the information to that battery. and then those pieces of artillery would carry out the firing. So there was probably 4 or 5, maybe even 6 different radios that you're monitoring at all times. And anytime that it got busy, we would have 2 operators come on duty instead of 1.
Mm. So uh, you're hearing a lot of things happen, and a lot of the historical reflections and stuff that someone like me, who wasn't even alive at the time of the war, would read, that we lost a lot of men over there, and the reception back home maybe wasn't the best. Was that your experience when you came back, as far as how you were greeted and treated?
Whenever I came home on leave for that Christmas 30 days, I did not notice any change at all. I mean, people were still very supportive. People were still good buddies. It was still fun to go out and grab a beer. I mean, it just didn't seem like anything had changed. But whenever I came back in '68 and was getting out of the service, things had definitely changed. There was student protest. People taught you, just thought differently of you, and treated you differently, and it was bad. I was invited to go to a luncheon, Rotary or Kiwanis or something like that, at a nice restaurant downtown. One of my family friends invited me to go, and everything was nice and oh, nice to have you here, nice to have you here. But at some point in time, whoever has a guest gets up and introduces the guest. He introduced, this is Forrest Hope. He's a Marine and just back from Vietnam. It was almost as if he said, here is Forrest Hope. He's a leper and very contagious, because nobody said anything to me after that introduction. Wow. No, glad you're here. No, thank you for your service. No, nothing. It's just like, let me get away from him. And I said, well, this is strange. But then as I started, went enrolled at Santa Fe, junior Santa Fe Community College at the time, in Gainesville, and I got to noticing is that these students aren't like the students that I went to school with. I'm a little older than they are, but they just don't seem right. We don't agree politically at all, and I'm here trying to learn, and they're kind of interested in partying, and it got to be to where you were better off if nobody knew that you had been in the service or had known that you had been in Vietnam, because if they did, they would start calling you things like baby killers, and that's kind of hard to swallow for at this time 21 years old, and they had people spit at you and call you all sorts of names, and I got to the point to where I let my hair grow. Where hippies were in fashion, I didn't let it grow that long, but
Sure.
definitely it didn't have the military high and tight look anymore. I tried to disassociate being anything to do with military, just trying to meld in, to fit. Talk about the service club is that I thought, okay, well, here I am back, and I have been in Vietnam, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to join the American Legion and the VFW. So I go into VFW, and I here in town, and I am like to apply for membership. I said, well, what war you been in? They said, well, I just got back from Vietnam. That ain't a war. They don't qualify. So I said, well, excuse me, I must be in the wrong place. So I never did join the VFW.
Wow.
I just stay away from them. And I'm sure those people have, gone on to their great reward. But that's what we were facing when we came back.
Did you know when you were going that you were serving your country?
That's the only reason I went. I mean, I was told to go, but I mean, it was patriotism.
And then you come back and then that's what you get?
I thought that I had done my duty. I had done my patriotic duty. I was done as I was trained to do, and did the very best that I could. And I come back and total no respect whatsoever. No welcome home. No thank you.
Does that change at some point?
It has now. It has now. I think that the Vietnam veterans saw what they came through, and they made a conscious decision whenever we went over into to Iraq and Afghanistan, is that we're not going to allow this to happen to this next generation. And so they have been very instrumental of reaching out to the returning vets from the most recent conflicts and saying, hey, look, this is the way it's going to be. You got these benefits coming to you. You need to get with a veteran service officer. You need to get your schooling done. There are scholarships that are available. The VA is very good at helping with you. If you got any medical problems, there are a lot of things that are available for you that nobody told us about. And the military is pretty much the same way. Is it, you get your discharge papers and you're out the door. Here's your final check and go. It's up to you to figure out how to get along in society. Sure. And that doesn't cut it, because things have changed in the 4 years or whatever years you've been gone. And so Vietnam veterans have been reaching out to those veterans and saying, what can I do to help you? Nobody was there for me, but what can I do to help you? So,
you were sent by the President of the United States, right? The Commander in Chief.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did at the time, congressmen, congresswomen, president, anybody stand up and go, we're not going to treat our veterans like this?
No. Mm-mm. No.
That's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like now, in this moment, if I was then, I'd go, I wonder, I don't think I could ever understand that, but certainly not now, how you could ever treat any veteran, even a veteran who didn't go to war, but served our country ready for war, how you could ever treat them any differently. And I understand some of the dialogue and some of the information coming back was innocent people were killed. I think innocent people were killed all the time, all around the world in different military conflict. And it's not intentional. You're fighting, and especially a 19-year-old, 18-year-olds. What would you say the average age was of the people you served with?
20.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some old guys there at 40, but the average age is about 20.
So, when it comes to Vietnam, especially Vietnam, it seems to me, and I've always been very respectful of anybody that I know that's a veteran, because it's not just driving down the road and seeing a car accident. You've been through something or seen a lot, but a lot of people don't like talking about it. A lot of veterans don't like. We've gotten into some stuff, but there's a lot of things we won't touch on that are just too much to discuss. Why is that?
It's hard to explain to somebody that hasn't been there and experienced that. I can't go talk to a professional football player about his job and get him to explain things to me. I've never been there. I've never worn that shoe. To explain to you what combat or what incoming or the smells of death is, you can't describe it. So instead of trying to describe it, just let's don't talk about it.
Understand. So what do you do now? You're very involved with local groups, veterans. Do you go out to the prison at times and help or do something?
I used to go up to New River Correctional Institute, which is part of the Florida State Correctional System, and met with 20, 25 veterans and trying to get them a dorm to themselves. It has been proven in studies is that if veterans are grouped together in a dorm type setting, is that they will behave better than in population at large. And they will look out for each other. And there's been numerous instances of where that is true. They trust each other. They got each other's back. And it's not like a gang, but it's just that they know they have been in that regiment life once before in boot camp. And if you can put them back into that environment together,
Mm-hmm.
then they're much less trouble for the prison population or for the wardens or the guards that have to look after them. Now, unfortunately, during COVID, that particular prison, correctional institute, shut down.
Mm.
And I have been actively looking for another one within a 30, 40-mile radius to get to and try to do the same thing there. There are other, I think there's 7 other in Florida to where there's organizations set up that people go in and help veterans specifically in setting up something to where they made a dumb mistake, and that's why they're in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to accept that enough people thought you were guilty, whether you think you're guilty or not.
Right.
Enough people did, and you're in here, and you can make the best of it or not. You can sit over on your bunk and you can mope all day long, or you can take and study classes. You can take courses on how to be a better person. You can take and study the Bible if you want, whatever. But it's your choice
Sure.
to do something or not.
The veterans, I know you're talking about coming back after Vietnam, growing the hair out, trying to find your way, if you will. Was that for all military? If any military personnel, if they were a veteran of World War I or II, could they proudly wear their uniform out and about during that time, or really was it just all the military was kind of frowned upon by
all military,
not everybody, but
all military would wear theirs in World War I or II or Korea, and they had parades for them. I never expected a parade or ticker tape or anything like that, but we were told coming back in August of '68 is to change into civilian clothes. Do not wear your military uniform at all while you travel. You will be mistreated if you do. And so that was, wow, why? I've been doing something to serve, fighting for their freedom, or fighting, for patriotism and for the cause of freedom and democracy. And so why is somebody hating me because I got a uniform on? And now I think that we have realized that it's not the soldier
mm-hmm.
that you need to be mad at. It's the guy who gave them that orders, and it's the Congress. It's the president.
Sure.
And that's where it needs to come from and get back to.
So since that time, like I mentioned, you've been involved with other veterans groups. Is there the Vietnam
Veterans of America?
Very active?
Very active. Mm-hmm. In the local chapter and a little bit in the state. Yes, sir.
How does it continue being active if folks who served in Vietnam are now older? Is there a way to keep it going to continue to exist? Because the folks who are older are naturally going to be, dying at some point. We all will. But how active is the organization? And is there a younger is there, like you think about the sisters of the Revolution or the daughters and stuff like that? Is there any type of succession, if you will? If that makes sense?
No. What we have is, in order to be a Vietnam Veterans of America, it's chartered by Congress, and our organization is open for those people who either actively were in Vietnam or in service during that Vietnam era. And
okay.
So in 63 to 74, somewhere in that area, I don't have those dates in front of me, but if you served, so those are the only ones that can join that organization. There is a sister organization, which is Associates of Vietnam Veterans. It's open to anybody who wants to carry on what we're doing. Most of the stuff that we have done has been legislatively trying to get things like the diseases that have been caused by Agent Orange,
mm-hmm.
which was literally dumped on troops. And a lot of them have died years, decades after they were in Vietnam. But because of the illnesses caused by Agent Orange, they're now eat up with cancer or dying at a very fast rate. So we help Congress, or Vietnam Veterans of America, help Congress understand what these symptoms were and got VA to acknowledge them so these veterans that can be compensated for their illnesses and treated for their illnesses. I mean, that's just one of
Sure.
the things that we had tried to do. And so in order to carry that on, the sister organization can take and do that, because being a date certain where you can join Vietnam Veterans of America, at some point it's the last man standing.
Right.
Okay, so it'll be all gone. So
But you guys will left a legacy, you know?
try to.
Yeah. Monuments, any monuments in Washington that you guys are, is there, we've talked about a wall.
There's a wall
Mm-hmm.
of V-shaped wall. It's in Washington D.C. That is, it's just called the Wall. It's the Vietnam Wall with the names of all 58,700
Mm.
whatever veterans who were killed in Vietnam, and that is kind of like some religions go to Mecca.
Yeah.
Okay, the Vietnam veterans, they go there, and it's the dates of the deaths progress along, and you go to the particular panel to find your buddy and take an etching
Mm-hmm.
off that monument and bring it home, and that's what you have left of your friend or friends, and that's I can't say sacred, but it's pretty darn close.
Sure. Have you ever been back to Vietnam since?
No, I have not been to Vietnam since. I know several people who have, and I tell you, I mean, it is a very beautiful country, and the people are very, very nice. And I see some Vietnamese people on the street now, and they're very nice and very appreciative. Once they find out that you were in service over there, they thank you for what you tried to do,
Mm.
and they're very, very bitter about how it ended. But there we can get away from patriotism and start dealing in politics again.
Right.
Because even though they were promised arms and air support, and once the Americans left, they actually left. I mean, they didn't come back and support them again or anything. And so the Vietnamese people were very bitter about that, deserting them.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So,
Anything else that you can add about the Vietnam War and maybe an experience, something you can share? We've covered a lot of stuff, but I didn't know if there's anything that's on your mind that I may not asked about that
I
might have covered it.
pretty well covered it all. I'm not a war hero. I just did what I was trained to do. The information that you and I have shared that's my story.
Mm-hmm.
There were, I don't know, 7 million servicemen in the service during the time of Vietnam. There were about almost 3 million who actually served in Vietnam or off the coast or affiliated with it. And like I say, those that died. But there are a lot of stories that are out there and of people, and I like to think about them because that's the way you keep them alive, is to take and share their stories. And I think I shared with you earlier about a friend of mine that I grew up with here in school, and he was a football player, and I played against him, and not against, we were the same team, but at practice time,
Sure.
he got to run over me, and he went in the Marines, and he was a radio operator like I was, and he was out in the field, and his buddy had a chance to meet his fiancee in Hawaii, but he didn't have any money, and so he went to my friend and explained the situation to him, and he said, "Well, listen, here's your $50. Why don't you go meet your fiancee? Y'all have a great time, and I'll take your patrol for you if your name comes up. Don't worry about it." So he goes off on his R&R, meets with his fiancee, and he comes back, and my friend had died.
Mm.
He'd been hit by a sniper. Well, that's would typically be the end of the story, but 45 years later, that Marine who went to Hawaii did get married, became a very successful attorney in Chicago area, and he contacted my friend's mother and said, "This has been on my mind for 45 years. I want to repay that $50 that your son loaned me." and here's interest for 45 years.
Mm-mm-mm.
Now, I mean, those things kind of tear at you because that's the story of that person now, and everybody out there has the name on the wall or no injuries or whatever. We all have stories. By telling your story, it helps relieve of some things that might be in you that you should not be trying to hold back. Some people try to do self-medication and drugs and alcohol to try to get through another night because, like I say, those sights cannot be unseen. Those nightmares are real years and years later. And you want to try and do anything that you can to help them so they don't give up and become one of the 20 veterans a day that commit suicide. That's a big number.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I just, appreciate the opportunity to share some things
Thank
with
you.
you and hope I've enlightened you a little bit. And
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for your service.